I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 93 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, LCSW, PhD, EMDR consultant, and mom of 3 daughters who has very dirty glasses that I'm currently cleaning off. It is one of those weeks where I am sitting here on a Sunday evening recording as I am anticipating child bedtime, and I have one kid watching videos on her iPhone, my iPhone next to me while I squeeze this in before putting her to bed. I know you parents understand the struggle of multitasking and doing a million things, but here I am, and thank you as always for joining me. Today I want to talk a little bit about a question I received on Instagram and my response to it. And this is a question that, sorry, I like food in my teeth. A question that I think is on the minds of many of you at different times. And that question is, do I, Carolyn, and also you, intensive therapist, ever offer free or sliding scale intensives? And how do I feel about the financial privilege that's required for someone to have the option of an intensive? I think this is a barrier for a lot of people in terms of thinking about whether or not to offer intensives. I think sometimes it's a barrier we make up to not face the fear that maybe we're afraid that maybe we won't be successful at doing this, but that's kind of a topic for another day. But I do think that fear is underneath it sometimes. People think like, well, their subconscious fear is I'm not going to be able to market and sell this. And that gets kind of covered up by it's unethical to charge this. And those things get very mixed up. But aside from that, I'm going to talk about what I do and then why I think your own decision in this area, whatever you do choose to do, is valid. And then I'm going to give some examples of some of the options that I've seen therapists, other ways that I've seen therapists who offer intensives handle this. So intensives are expensive, right? My intensives are expensive. I charge $6,000 for 15 hours. I don't take insurance, and insurance doesn't even cover intensives, as I've discussed many, many times. Often an out-of-network provider can get, maybe the client can get coverage for the first hour, maybe the first 90 minutes, sometimes, rarely, of an intensive day covered by insurance, but I've never seen more than that, and 90 minutes is actually rare. It's more common that the first hour you'll get some reimbursement. So yeah, 6K, 15 hours, it's a lot of money. And let me remind you all of what's going into that rate when I charge that, when you charge that, when anyone charges that. My experience, okay, I, have been an EMDR therapist for 5 years at this point. I am a consultant. I have gone through tons of advanced training. I have been a therapist since 2012. I'm a highly skilled professional who's offering a service that is in high demand and is extremely effective. To get to this point with this level of experience and competence, I've had to do a lot of training. That takes time and money. I have to keep up with my CEUs. I have to keep up with my licensure. I have to rent the office that I rent to do intensives in. All these things cost money, right? Hello, grad school and loans, right? We have spent lots of money on grad school, and most of us are still paying back our loans. And, we deserve to be compensated in a way that is kind of commensurate with the investments we've made in our own professional development. Then, money aside, the fact that, or not money aside, but like our own, what we bring to it kind of in a, professional and training capacity aside, we're devoting our entire day, maybe even our entire week to one person. Therefore, and if it's 15 hours total that you do over the course of a week, which is often what I do, obviously losing out on hourly revenue that I need to make up somehow. I could be seeing 25 hourly clients, but I'm seeing one person for 15 hours and they're getting an incredibly transformative experience. And I'm losing out. I mean, not losing out, but I'm choosing to have this model instead. And so I need to make up that differential. An hour of an intensive for me does not cost the same as a 50-minute session. It just doesn't. As I've talked about in many episodes, the results of an intensive can exceed 6 months to a year of hourly sessions. And then you do the math. My hourly rate is $200 an hour, which I should increase, but that's what it is $200 an hour. And 6K, and it say that's like, whatever, I can't do the math right now, but you're paying less for the intensive than you would be paying for a year of therapy, which is often at least how long it takes to get the kind of results you can get from an intensive. And like I said in the intro, why do people ask this question about access, right? Of course it's important. I'm not saying it is important. Does everyone deserve to have access to high quality care? Of course. But is it the responsibility of the individual therapist to fix this and then suffer, at the cost of their own sanity and financial well-being? I don't think so, and I don't think seeing 30 clients a week at an insurance rate is providing high quality care. When you're totally exhausted, when you're worried about your rent, right? High quality care means the provider is well rested and financially relatively stable so they can show up well and give clients true value for what they're paying for, right? If you're worried about rent and all, like, that's very hard to do. If you know your client is financially more well off than you are and they could be paying more, that comes into the session. Someone on Instagram recently asked me if I ever do sliding scale or pro bono intensives. My answer is I do in a way, and here's how. So in the state of Pennsylvania, there is a victim services fund that is incredibly generous. Honestly, I've looked at other states, and there aren't many other states that have as generous of a fund. And it just so happens that Pennsylvania does, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Essentially, not to get too into the nitty gritty, but a survivor of a violent crime can get up to $35,000 from the state towards counseling bills. And part of what goes along with that is like the client can't pay any of it out of pocket, right? Like we're not allowed to like bill on top of our hourly, you can't say like, oh, $100 an hour from them and $100 an hour from my client. No, like the state pays the whole charge. So you can do the math on $35,000. So obviously, or not obviously, but I have like a large portion of my client base tends to be people with significant sexual trauma histories. They're all getting that coverage. So obviously, $6,000 doesn't even eat up that entire fund, doesn't even come close. And I'm allowed with this fund to charge whatever my rate is. Like, I have to fill out paperwork and, kind of explain my process and why I offer intensives and stuff like that a little bit here and there. So there's some work on my part, but I'm being paid what I deserve, what I want to be paid, what I need to be paid. Clients in need are getting access to excellent treatment. Many of these clients couldn't afford an hour session with me, not to mention a 15-hour intensive. But they're not paying anything, right? It's not even like insurance where there's a copay. Nothing, zero. Is there a drawback? Well, like I said, there's paperwork, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. It can take a couple months to get paid, and it takes a while to get set up with the service. Okay, all that kind of sounds like working with an insurance company, but different from an insurance company. I can charge the rate I want to charge. It's not dictated by insurance, and the client never pays a dime. It's a win-win all around. So I highly encourage you. I'm pretty sure there's something like this in every single state, and it varies widely how generous it is and what every state has its own rules. Pennsylvania just happens to be incredibly generous, and who knows how long that will go on. Pennsylvania still has a Democratic governor right now, so hopefully it's going to stick around, but I do always kind of worry that this fund will be taken away. People often ask me, like, where does this, yeah, it's okay. That's my 3-year-old. Where does the money come from? It's actually the money comes from fines that perpetrators pay. So that's where the money is coming from. So it's like phenomenal that this is being redistributed in such a effective way, So look into it in your state. That's what I do. And I would say that like sometimes in a given year, up to half of my intensives can be people who qualify for this fund. So that's huge. And that's shifting a little bit, obviously, as I now live in Vermont and that kind of thing. But when I was, Pennsylvania resident, doing in-person intensives in Pennsylvania, I was using this fund constantly. So I absolutely encourage you to look into it. It's gaining more, like people are more aware of it in Pennsylvania than they used to be, But when I first started doing it, there weren't that many therapists who even knew that this kind of a fund existed. So I encourage you to look into it in your state. Victim services, victims of crime funds, whatever. There's, I'm sure you can look it up and Google it and find something out about your state. But here's what I want you to know about whatever you choose to do in your practice, okay? I support your decision. As long as you are making a decision about pricing and access that actually serves you and is not coming from a place of guilt. And how can you be sure of this? By making sure your financial needs are met by your practice model, whatever you decide that is going to be. And reminder, if you want that to be all intensives, that could be all intensives. But I want you to have your financial needs be met before you start offering sliding scale or pro bono intensives, okay? Or even hourly EMDR sessions, honestly. You should be having your needs met before you're offering low or no cost services. And I think it's really important for you to be honest with yourself about your financial needs. It doesn't have to just be the amount of money where you can pay all your bills and have a few pennies to rub together at the end of the month. No, their financial needs looks like a lot of things, and can include things like getting a massage every week because it helps you be a better therapist. That to me is a financial need, not a luxury. I mean, it's wonderful, and in some ways it is a luxury, but like if it makes you better at what you do, if it helps you manage stress better and be more present and more connected to yourself, that's serving your clients, right? Just as an example. There are some exercises that I've created that I like to lead my coaching clients through to help them get to a rate for their intensives that actually reflects the financial realities of their lives, which includes a life that is not overburdened by too many clients, without enough time for self-care, actual self-care, meaning you're rested, you're doing the things that make you feel rejuvenated, whatever that is. True self-care so that you're able to show up as the therapist that you want to be for your clients, right? And if you need some help figuring these numbers out, like what is that number for you, that's a great thing for the two of us to work on in one of my 2-hour coaching intensives. I will link that service in the show notes if you're interested in knowing more about that. If you're sliding your fee out of a sense of guilt or a sense of obligation, or because you're weighed down by the messages, not right now, sorry, that kid, kid who's tired, because you're weighed down by all the messages we have all internalized, that the work we do should be free or very low cost, like that is heavy, and we all get that programming, right? I think one of the reasons we're told this is because therapists in our current environment are overwhelmingly female, as we know, and many therapists have other marginalized identities. In general, we know that female-dominated care work is not valued in our society, and those professions are underpaid, and there's a belief that those professionals should just be content with doing good work and not want to, quote, make money. Think teachers, nurses, and of course, therapists, social workers. Of course, no one tells doctors, dentists, or lawyers that they should be working for free, right? And people don't expect that they should be. But, our work, it's just talking, right? We're no different than a friend. It's not really important. We're just letting people talk. We're being a good listener. Yeah, that's not true. I know that's not true. And I think that we push back on that by demanding to be paid what we need to be paid, what we're worth, what we deserve, right? I support the choices you make about your fees and your practice, as long as you're making them in a clear-headed way, not clouded by guilt and shame. So think about that. Regarding what other therapists do in regards to fee setting for intensives, and in terms of like how they, give back or provide access, right? Therapists grapple with that issue in a lot of ways. I definitely have seen therapists who do offer an intensive or 2 a year, 1, maybe 2 a year, we're talking about, pro bono or sliding scale. But these therapists do this with intention and in accordance with their business goals, meaning that their regular fees for intensives are high. They're charging at least $6,000 for a 15-hour intensive. In some cases, more. They need to be covering the revenue lost on the pro bono intensive, and that gets factored into what they charge other clients. Basically, their other clients are subsidizing the low fee, intensive, right? And that's not good or bad. It just is a reality, right? So it's something that impacts the entire practice system, everyone who's involved in it, right? All the clients and the therapist. I work with, and I know other therapists, intensive therapists who use services in their state, like the one I described that I use, Victim Services Fund, reimbursing clients for counseling services. Of course, like I said, this is a great way to increase access without having to deal with insurance, right? Like I just said a couple of minutes ago, insurance might reimburse something from the first 60 minutes, maybe 90 minutes of each day. But that's the max. So if you're doing intensives, it's not really an issue that you don't, play with insurance, right? It's not really a factor. And then I also know and work with therapists who don't offer any kind of reduced fee or pro bono intensives, but because they are in a good financial place, thanks to their, how they plan and how they structure their practice, and good for them. That's what we all need to be doing. They're able to contribute to the world and to their communities in ways that matter to them, right? And they can do it without worrying about their own bottom line. So these contributions can look like so many things, right? It can look like real, substantial, meaningful donations to causes that they care about. Look like financial support in the form of mutual aid. I know someone who is helping to pay for a child's education of someone in her community, and she pays for that from her financially lucrative practice. Volunteer work, like I know people who are very committed to reparations and use a certain amount of the money that they make to pay reparations. Volunteer work that is really, really important for an organization to keep going. It's like these people volunteer consistently and give of their time and energy to an organization that matters to them, that thrives and survives on volunteer work. Being on the board of an organization, a great way to serve something that matters to you. There are so many ways to give back meaningfully. You can be creative. There's a million ways, and they're all needed. And when you're financially strapped, overworked, and you're chronically stressed by being financially strapped and overworked, it can be very, very hard to give back meaningfully. Hard financially, hard in terms of your energy, hard in terms of how you feel when you're doing it. Like if you don't have anything left, but you still are like, oh, I need to go volunteer, like you're going to show up very differently than if you're like doing it with a rested and like with your rested energetic self who can give like fully and with a smile on your face, right? So just a few examples of other things I've seen people doing. And, I hope that the message I'm trying to get across is when you're pricing your intensives, whatever way you choose, I see you and I validate the decision you're making, as long as you're making it with an intention. And it's not just coming from a place of, I'm bad for wanting to make money. I'm bad for wanting to charge like a high fee, so I'm going to do X. That is not how we run a sustainable business, and a business that's even grounded in, I don't think that's ethical, right? Because you're not coming at this from a clear-headed place, right? You're coming at it from how other people's opinions of you might impact you, or all sorts of things. Those are not the places from which we make solid ethical decisions. So I know people love to throw the word unethical around when we're charging high fees. I think it's unethical to see 40 clients a week and fall asleep and forget, people's names because you're so exhausted. Like there's that, I don't know if any of you I probably have talked about this before, but there's a real series, this comedian called The Only Therapist That Takes Your Insurance. I think she's done like 11 or 12 of these short videos, and they are hilarious, but speak to the fact that, a lot of therapists who take insurance are not great. And they're not great often because they don't have the energy, the bandwidth, the financial resources to be a good therapist for you. So that's not the answer, So if you're struggling with guilt or shame about accessibility and intensives, I hope this episode has helped you a bit, or has at least helped you realize that you're not alone in some of the thoughts and fears that come up for you when these questions come up. I also hope that you feel somewhat empowered if you're planning and hoping to offer premium fee intensives by some of the things I've shared here. if you do need support in this area, I would be honored to support you. We can talk about ways that I can do that. Please reach out to me at Future Template Parent on Instagram if that's you. And as always, that's what I meant to say. Thank you so much for listening. I've been hearing from some lovely people in the past week, a few people just reaching out to me and saying how much the podcast has helped them and means to them. And I just want you all to know that that means everything to me and is the reason I'm doing this, to help support therapists who are thinking about offering intensives, who are in the middle of that transition, and people who are on that journey. So I just love spreading the good, the good news. I'm no longer practicing anything. So that's a Christian reference that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me anymore, but I'm spreading the good news about intensives, and I'm honored that I can be part of that for you. Take good care, everyone.